Todd Bates is going to be sticking around for another few years with the Oklahoma Sooners coming up next on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what an adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy Josh Homer is off in Vegas getting ready for some Oklahoma baseball. Go follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams, and the show is at Locked On Sooners. And the big story coming out of Oklahoma football on a Thursday afternoon, aside from PJ Adebawore putting up 500 pounds on the squat, was the report from Matt Zenitz of 247 Sports that the Oklahoma Sooners and Todd Bates are nearing a contract extension that's going to keep Bates around for another 3 years. Now, Todd Bates was a part of the assistant group that received a raise at the Board of Regents meeting earlier this offseason, but this extension is set to increase his salary to $900,000, according to Zenith's report, which would put him kind of in line with that defensive coordinator type of pay. A lot of coordinators are making just north of $1 million a year right now. Todd Bates has held that co-defensive coordinator title while under Ted Roof and under Brent Venables, but now is getting the dollars to go along with it. Why is this a big deal for the Oklahoma Sooners? Well, Todd Bates is one of the better recruiters out there for defensive tackles. David Stone obviously is the big fish that the Oklahoma Sooners got in the 2024 recruiting cycle. You had to land that one. I know there was this expectation all along that the Sooners would get him, but when you have teams like Miami and Texas A&M and name every other big time recruiting school, Michigan State at the time, it never seemed like a lock until it was a lock. Yes, did Todd Bates has he had misses on the recruiting trail? Of course, every recruiter is going to, but he's put you right there in the thick of it for a number of big time prospects. Yeah, you're not going to win them all. And yeah, some are going to, turn the other direction when you think you got them. I think we can all think back to the David Hicks scenario where all things looked like it was going towards Oklahoma. Even the coaching staff expected him to commit to Oklahoma, and then he did not. It really shocked everybody. But Todd Bates is a big reason why you got Jaden Jackson. Jaden Jackson, didn't expect to come on his Oklahoma visit, had kind of seemed to be locked in with Texas, at least mentally, until he made that visit to Norman. And it was the vibe that he got in Norman. And a lot of that is due to the assistants and the coaching staff. And obviously the soul mission is a big part of that. Even Jaden Jackson mentioned that when he committed, that the soul mission was a big part of why he committed to Oklahoma. But you got to have a guy like a Todd Bates headlining your recruiting, being the guy at the forefront of that. And he's done a fantastic job on the recruiting trail of making Oklahoma a player for these big time interior defensive line prospects. And again, you get David Stone, you get Jaden Jackson. I mean, two to me are the most dynamic defensive tackle prospects in this class. I know Jaden Jackson only ended up as a 4-star, but if you've been watching this show for the last year plus, one, I'm a big fan of Jaden Jackson. Guys that are 300 pounds shouldn't move like he moves. And so he's going to be one of those guys that I think he outperforms his star rating, his final grade, his prospect rating, all of that stuff. So when you can get a David Stone and then you compare him with a Jaden Jackson as well in the same recruiting class, that sets the tone and it creates an opportunity for you to then stack solid defensive line recruiting on top of another. Remember, Oklahoma's defensive line recruiting was pretty abysmal under Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley. It was not good. yeah, they had really, really good edge players and a Nick Bonito and a Ronnie Perkins. Every once in a while, they'd get a good defensive tackle prospect and like a Jalen Redmond or a Perion Winfrey, but rarely did they have those guys together. And honestly, did those guys ever reach the heights that we needed them to reach in order to be an elite defensive front? No, they didn't. But part of it was because you didn't have, more than one of those guys that you were bringing into a class. It was just one, or you had one at a time that was performing at a really, really high level, a Neville Gallimore. Okay. And then it seemed like there was a time where you didn't have a guy that was that dynamic as both a pass rusher and a run defender. Well, Todd Bates is helping you kind of redefine that at defensive tackle and help rebuild that. Kamari Moore, the 2025 defensive tackle commit that Oklahoma has and has had since last summer. And it doesn't seem like that commitment's going anywhere, especially as, Williams Nwaneri goes to Missouri. The Lee Summit North, quote unquote, pipeline that seemed to be formulating is kind of gone by the wayside at this point. Kamari Moore is still locked in, and he's wanting to go to Oklahoma. Todd Bates is a big reason why that is. And this is another one of those kind of kids that, quote unquote, is flying under the radar a little bit, was a 3-star prospect when he committed to Oklahoma. I doubt that very much that he stays as a 3-star prospect. He's just winning he had a great kind of all-star camp, did great at the All-American Bowl, and is going to be a prospect that rises a lot this offseason and then through his senior season, much like Jaden Jackson did in the 2024 recruiting cycle. And so you're seeing the value of having a really, really strong recruiter at defensive tackle is that it puts you in the conversation for all of the elite defensive tackle prospects. Even though you didn't get a Dominic McKinley, you were very much in the mix for Dominic McKinley for a very long time. Does that mean you're always going to get these guys? No. I mean, there are other really good recruiters out there, but you got to be in the mix before you can get the recruitment or get the commitment and get the signing. If you're not in the mix, you're not going to get a commitment. But you got to have a guy that puts you in the mix. It's like Wayne Gretzky always said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Well, Todd Bates is taking his shots. Brent Venables and his staff, they're taking their shots. They're going after the big names. They're going after the best prospects in each recruiting class. You're not always going to get them, but you got to be aiming high and you got to be shooting for the stars, quote unquote, so to speak. And Todd Bates has helped Oklahoma do that at a very high level so far. He's got to continue to stack it in the defensive tackle group. While I think it's getting better year after year, it's got to continue to do that. You lost Jacob Lacey due to a medical retirement. That really hurts your interior defensive line, but you still got a Dejon Terry who had a really, really strong year in year one with Oklahoma in 2023. Now you got to continue to build that up. Who's going to be the guy that takes the step? Grayson Halton, he flashed a lot in the spring game last year. Can he take a step? When I talked to Ted Roof after the spring game, for him, he spoke about consistency. If Grayson Halton can find some consistency, he can be a big-time player at defensive tackle because he's got a really, really quick step, and he's a productive player inside. So Todd Bates is coaching. I think it's helping Oklahoma to get better and better year in and year out. And you're going to have him now for another 3 years. And that continuity matters as you're trying to build a room. And there was a chance that Todd Bates might not have been here. He was being approached and pursued by other top programs across the country. And there's a reason why. It's because he's a really good recruiter and a really, really good position coach. So Oklahoma gets to keep him around for the next few years and hopefully continue to build that defensive line depth chart, that defensive tackle depth chart over the next few years. One offer that they've made recently is really, really intriguing along the defensive interior. We got to talk about Malik Autry, man. This guy has got something to him. I might have found my favorite player in the 2025 class. Let's find out who Malik Autry is coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Again, today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. I can speak to this. My wife and I just spent a few days in Colorado Springs. We flew to the airport, picked up our car at the rental. What was it? a Nissan Rogue. It was great for navigating the Colorado Springs streets, but where we were staying was about an hour outside of Colorado Springs, out in a cabin, all-wheel drive necessary, dirt roads, getting deep into the wilderness. Well, the Nissan Rogue worked out perfectly for us. It was a great drive. It handled wonderfully, even in the snow, the rain, the ice. Never had to worry on the curvy, windy roads. It was fantastic. The Nissan has a great lineup. You can also check out the Pathfinder, which has room up to 8 and expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. So take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. And so we've got to talk about one Malik Autry. This is a recent offer that the Oklahoma Sooners have made in the 2025 recruiting class, a defensive tackle prospect who, again, I might have found my new favorite player in the 2025 recruiting class. Whether he ends up at Oklahoma or not, I mean, fingers crossed. Let's take a look at what one Malik Autry has to offer. He is a 320-pound, 6'5" prospect who is a consensus 4-star prospect right now on the recruiting services, and a dude that just gets after the football. If you're watching with us here on YouTube, let's go and take a look at some of what Malik Autry has to offer. He is currently an Auburn commit, and I mean, there's no reason 6'5", 320 guys should move the way Malik Autry moves. I mean, he's got a really, really good step. He does play with great leverage. He's able to not just penetrate into the backfield with quickness, but he has good strength. He's able to do a good job at getting to the point of attack. I feel like he does a great job at holding up blockers and then kind of playing in a 2-gap system, which if you're a 320 guy and expected to play as nose tackle, you got to be able to play in that 2-gap where you're not just, shooting a gap, which we see him do quite a bit if you're looking at his huddle highlights, but he also is able to kind of hold up his blocker and then pick the gap depending on which way the ball carrier is going. We just saw a play where, okay, he was not even the outside contained, but he chases the guy down from his nose tackle spot 15 yards down the field, a running back, and knocks him out of bounds, showing that the kid's got elite hustle and is going to be somebody who's never going to give up on a play. He gets his arms around guys and he's able to bring them to the ground. But this is one of those guys that you have to be able to build a Brent Venables defense around. We talked about how important it was to get Jaden Jackson in the 2024 recruiting cycle, because you've got to be able to have those guys that can take on multiple blockers and eat up space, making things a lot easier both for your linebackers and for other defensive linemen around him. Well, Malik Autry is another one of those dudes that has that potential to him. Why is this one so intriguing? Well, he's been an Auburn commit since February of 2023. So for more than a year, he's been committed to Auburn. He's from Alabama. But in recent weeks, he started seeing some other offers come around. Oklahoma offered him on the 26th, Texas as well, UCF back on the 25th, Florida back on the 20th. So his name is getting out there a little bit more. He might have flown under the radar for a minute, but that has gone by the wayside. Everybody is coming after him, and you can just see why, because he's just a dynamic player on the interior. He can play the 3 technique, that defensive tackle that lines up between the guard and the offensive tackle, or he can play a 1 technique, somebody that lines up between the guard and the center, or he can play that straight up nose tackle, that 0 technique, lining up right over the center. And that's part of what's going to make him so valuable at the next level, because he can line up in a multiple positions, because he's got the agility, he's got the quickness, and he's got the play strength to play in several different spots, which I think is something that benefits interior defensive line prospects. It's what's going to make Jaden Jackson and David Stone so valuable to Brent Venables' defensive line, is because they can line up in multiple spots, and he can throw out and deploy, and Zach Alley can deploy different defensive fronts because of that versatility and that ability. So he just looks like one of those guys that's going to continue to be a fast riser in the 2025 recruiting cycle. Because, I mean, as you can see, if you're following along here on YouTube, if not, highly recommend you go check out his huddle highlights, because he just moves in such a way that is just really, really impressive. More just about his recruiting profile right now. The number 89 prospect in the 247 Sports Top 247, number 7 defensive lineman in the class right now. Over at On3, he is rated pretty highly as well. Looking at the number, they've got him currently as the number 32 defensive lineman, but don't expect that to last very long. Rivals has him as the number 10 defensive lineman. So 247 Sports is probably the highest on him right now. But again, expect that to continue to rise as his senior year goes along. We're big fans of the nose tackle type, the 3 technique type. You got to have really, really good interior defensive line prospects added to your class. We just spent a whole segment talking about the importance of stacking defensive linemen in multiple recruiting classes. If you compare a Kamari Moore with a Malik Autry, my goodness, and have that follow David Stone and Jaden Jackson, okay, now you're cooking pretty good right now at defensive tackle. Again, I fully believe that Kamari Moore ends up at least as a 4-star, and then Malik Autry, if Oklahoma could add him, there's a good chance, even if Oklahoma doesn't add him, I really think that he could end up as a 5-star prospect by the time this cycle is all said and done. Again, 320 isn't supposed to move like that. And again, if you can add that 320 to Jaden Jackson, who's north of 300 and probably going to be pushing 310, 320 by the time he is being relied upon for significant snaps, then you've got your nose tackles and you've got it for multiple years. I was a big fan of Ashton Sanders in the 2023 recruiting cycle, and I very much expect him to be a part of Oklahoma's future along the defensive interior. But if he's not quite ready this year or next year, I mean, he's going to have some serious competition for those nose tackle snaps. But I do think that he's going to be able to factor into the rotation a little bit this year before taking a significant role in 2025. So yeah, defensive tackle recruiting, it's huge. It's so important, especially in the SEC when you're going to be playing these offensive lines that, I mean, they have NFL offensive linemen up and down the line, and you're in the trenches week in and week out with some of the toughest, most physical dudes in the country. You've got to have some of those guys on your defensive line if you expect to have an elite defense, which Brent Venables expects to have. And, they've got really good linebacker depth for the next several years. They've got really good defensive back depth. I think the edge depth is really, really good. Now it's a matter of building that interior defensive line depth, which I think they're on a really, really nice track and on a nice roll towards doing so. But you gotta add to it. You can't just rely on Kamari Moore in this cycle. You got to be able to pull a Malik Autry if you can get that. It's going to be a big time recruitment to follow, and we'll continue to follow it along here on Locked On Sooners. Man, what a week it's been for the Sooners women, and what a weekend it's going to be for Oklahoma women as well. Let's recap and catch up with all that's gone down here this week, and we'll do that next here on Locked On Sooners. Right now, make every moment more with FanDuel. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official sports book partner of the NBA, the NFL, and of the Locked On Network. The Oklahoma Sooners women's basketball team clinched their second straight regular season Big 12 title with a win over Texas on Wednesday night. Man, what a game. It's one of those things that we've seen this team do all year. So resilient. Before conference play began, they were 6-5 coming off of a loss to Southern, and just not looking like the team that we saw a year ago that won a co-Big 12 title, won a share of the Big 12 title with Texas in conference play. After losing Taylor Robertson and Maddie Williams and blanking on the other big time names that they lost, but after losing several big names that were a part of that roster a year ago, it was understandable. Like, okay, maybe they might take a step back this year. Maybe they might be a little bit slow to start. Well, once Big 12 play began, Jennie Baranczyk and her crew just figured it out. I mean, they've been on an absolute tear, 15-2 in Big 12 play, with 2 wins over Texas and a win over Kansas State. One of those losses was a top 25 loss to West Virginia in Morgantown. But you beat Kansas State, who at the time was the number 2 team in the nation. You beat Texas just this week, the number 3 team in the nation. At some point, the pollsters are going to have to put Oklahoma in the top 15, top 10. And they really should be a top 10 team at this point. The only thing that's holding them back is stuff that happened 2 months ago. They're not even close to the same team. But in this game, they again showed their resiliency, showed their fight. They were down double digits at multiple times in this game. But Peyton Verhulst, Nevaeh Tot, Lexi Keys, Sahara Williams, I mean, they had a phenomenal comeback. And even though they didn't shoot the ball well, they only shot 36%, which is not even close to their season average as a team. They still were able to hang with Texas, in large part because they had a fantastic night on the boards. They out-rebounded Texas 44-28 and had 20 offensive rebounds. 20 offensive rebounds. That is huge. That's going to win you a lot of basketball games, even when you're not at your best. I mean, Peyton Verhulst, she led the team with 18 points, did not have a good shooting night. Down the stretch, Oklahoma was 1 for 7 in the final 3:20. Lexi Keys hit a jumper with about 3:20 left in the game to put Oklahoma up by 1. And then Oklahoma went cold until Lexi Keys hit the 3 to go ahead, to put Oklahoma ahead with just seconds remaining. And it was on a play where, okay, Oklahoma got a really great inbound play to Skylar Vann, who gets a shot off, but isn't able to make it. But the hustle, the Skylar Vann hustle, she gets the ball back, finds Keys at the 3-point line, who doesn't hesitate and buries the 3. Oklahoma ends up winning the game. And with 1 game left in the regular season, they are the Big 12 champion. So in 2 seasons under Jennie Baranczyk, the Oklahoma Sooners have 2 Big 12 titles. And it's getting to the point where you have to start considering, okay, I think it's time for an extension for Jennie Baranczyk. Make sure she doesn't go anywhere or isn't poached by another big-time basketball school. And just continue to build your team, build your program around Jennie Baranczyk, much like you did around somebody who is about to get all the flowers this weekend in Patty Gasso. Patty Gasso was hired, almost 30 years ago with the Sooners, and look what she's built. Look what she's done. Joe Castiglione has proven yet again that he knows how to hire coaches, and he did it again with Jennie Baranczyk. Jennie from the block, crushing it again. Again, they're 15-2 in Big 12 play. Have a chance to go 16-2. They play Kansas in Lawrence on Saturday, a chance to really close the season strong. And she's just doing a great job on the recruiting trail. She's doing a great job at finding ways to get a lot of different players involved, where one night it's Sahara Williams, setting a career high like she did against Oklahoma State. Lexi Keys, she's had games where she's been Oklahoma's leading scorer, or at least one of their leading scorers. She's played off the bench. She's played in the starting lineup. Peyton Verhulst in Big 12 play has been fantastic, one of the best players in the conference. And it just goes to show Jennie Baranczyk and her coaching staff's ability to adjust and make adjustments. Against Texas, they were struggling at times, but they made adjustments and they were able to figure out a way to get that team going again. And so much of it is just a matter of settling your team down and getting them, to play within themselves and play within the offense. And I mean, Jennie Baranczyk is doing that as well as any coach in the country right now. Her team is as hot as any team in the country. Will they won't get a top, a top seed in the NCAA tournament. They won't be a number 1 seed, but there's a really good chance that they're a 2 or a 3 seed. And I would be shocked at this point if they are not a host seed for the opening 2 rounds, I should say, of the NCAA tournament. And that takes us to Patty Gasso and the Oklahoma Sooners softball. This weekend will open up Love's Field in Norman. And it's one of those moments in your fandom, in sports history, where we get to honor a legacy while that person is still at the height of their game, at the top of their game, has a team at the top of their game. So many times, these things come around, whether it's a stadium or a statue or what have you, these things come along, and it's long after that coach has retired or, gone and departed this world. But Patty Gasso gets an opportunity to usher the Oklahoma Sooners into Love's Field after nearly 30 years of work that she's put in to this program, taking it from, the recreational softball fields in Norman to Marita Hines Field, and then building a championship program that has now become the class of college softball over the last 3 years. And in that time has become the most dominant force in sports alongside KJ Kindler and women's gymnastics. What they've done in their win streak, which is now at 67 games and has little look of slowing down, is continued to establish their dominance and their excellence along the way. And as she loses the all-time home run queen, Jocelyn Allo, or the best defensive shortstop to maybe ever play the game in Grace Lyons, and the best pitcher in college softball from 2023 in Jordy Ball, she continues to raise Oklahoma's standard through recruiting and continues to retool this roster in such a way that it keeps it humming at a level of excellence that we've never seen before in the sport. And as Oklahoma pursues something that's never been done, a four-peat as national champions, they're going to get to play the rest of their home slate in Love's Field, the house that Patty Gasso built, Patty's Palace, the Queen's Castle, whatever moniker you want to add to it. And it's well-deserved. It's a deserving platform. It's a deserving stage for one of the best coaches of all time, regardless of sport, one of the best programs of all time, regardless of sport, certainly a top 2 program at the University of Oklahoma. They deserve their flowers this weekend. And even though the stadium's not fully completed yet, when they are able to get 4,200 people into that stadium, plus standing room only seats, it's going to create an electric atmosphere, an environment that is going to be the envy of college softball programs across the country, and continue to add to the lore and also the excitement of the growth of college softball. As it continues to grow, Oklahoma will continue to be at the epicenter of that growth, whether it's at USA Softball Field in Oklahoma City or at Love's Field in Norman, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the softball capital of the world, and the Oklahoma Sooners are the capital of Oklahoma softball around the world. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Follow my buddy Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, I'm John Williams, Boomer Sooner.